Good evening, everyone. My computer says it's 6, whether the one on the wall is quite there or not. So I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask you all to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. I'd like to indicate for the record that all members are present with the exception so far of Director Durant, who I'm sure is en route. But the rest of us are all here and accounted for, and we have representing BART, Director Keller. I'm looking at Gail's name and I can't get it out. So thank you, Joel, for joining us. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to comment on any item within the scope of the CCTA's business that is not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no one rush forward, we will close the public comment period and go to the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes for 2 separate meetings, for the authority minutes of March 18th and for the Salary and Benefits Ad Hoc Committee minutes of March 18th. Do I have any additions, corrections, or a motion?
Move approval.
Motion by Romick, a second by Anderson. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Question through the chair.
Yes.
The second motion for the salary ad hoc committee,
Yes.
even though,
You can approve it if you were not there, if you
Yep.
read the minutes.
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. That is right.
Sorry about that.
That's right.
You got a real deep voice there.
I got a deep voice there for a while. I'll practice that. Okay. The next item on the agenda is our consent calendar. Is there anything anyone wishes to pull for separate discussion? Newell.
I just want to make a comment on one item,
Okay.
just to thank folks. It's actually just related to the last question on benefits. And on that item, I just want to thank the committee for all the work that they did to get us to that type of an agreement. I think it sets a great trend, and I do hope that all of our huge staff, our small staff here, understand that and hope that we're all on the same page. But I just want to say thank you. I know you guys did a lot of work, and it's taken a long time to get to this, so thank you. And
Very good.
I'd be glad to make a motion to accept the consent calendar.
And I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Arnrich, a second by Tatson. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is a major discussion item. It is a new item, 3.1, which is the approval of principles for development of a transportation expenditure plan. And Ross is going to handle this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Pierce. Ross Chittenden, Deputy Executive Director for Projects here with the Authority. Item 3.1 is an action item requesting your approval of principles for development of a transportation expenditure plan, or TEP. We've started to use that acronym. I'll try to use all words, but occasionally I might slip into the TEP. And the principles document is a 2-page attachment to your staff report, so hopefully if you had a chance to look over that. If approved, the principles would form the basic framework for stakeholder engagement for development of the potential transportation expenditure plan and sales tax measure proposal that could be placed on the ballot in 2016 or subsequent years. As we discussed at the Authority's meeting here in March, there is no decision yet for such a ballot measure. This is just really the first step to get that going. In March, the board did direct staff to undertake activities necessary to develop a TEP in the event that the Authority and its partners, and including the Board of Supervisors, choose to put a ballot measure on in 2016. And again, we view the development of the principles as the first step in the process. The principles in your packet are proposed to help guide the Authority's effort to prioritize fund and implement a transportation expenditure plan that improves safety, reliability, and the efficiency of our transportation system, kind of built around those themes. The authority has adopted principles in the past on several occasions. In 2003 and 2004, the last time we went to the voters, we adopted a very similar set of principles. And also in 2010, after the passage of SB 375 related to greenhouse gas reduction, we developed a very similar set of principles. Principles that are in your packet are very similar in that they're built around long-standing traditions here at the authority, including consensus-based planning, accountability and transparency, equity to ensure benefits for all regions of the county through a balanced approach that promotes a healthy environment and strong economy, public participation and engagement in a wide variety of stakeholders, including the RTPCs, jurisdictions, and in the last meeting we discussed the potential of implementing an external committee. In the past we call it EPAC, Expenditure Plan Advisory Committee, so we're working on a proposal for that. The principles continue a commitment to growth management, cooperative planning, and embedded in the principles is support of the vision, goals, strategies, and actions documented in the draft 2014 countywide comprehensive transportation plans. So if you concur with these principles tonight or give us some direction for editing those, the next steps will be to engage in discussions with the RTPCs and other stakeholders and things like considerations of the amount and term of a possible sales tax measure, the components that would be included in such a measure, namely possible projects, programs, whether new programs, augmentations to existing programs and such, and how we would analyze the various options to ensure that we're maximizing benefits and that we do that through a robust public input process, and then a variety of other policy considerations to determine what goes into an ordinance and what would be decided through implementation policy that this board would need to consider after, in the event that such a measure did pass. Staff continues to work with the Gray Bone Consulting Team on an overall schedule, strategy, and outreach program to ensure that if we put a measure on the balance, we have something that would benefit the county for several decades to come. As Chair indicated, this is a new item. It's kind of a process that we're suggesting for this go-around, that we bring items directly to the board here versus going through the planning and the APC committee, and that's your choice to decide on that. So if we go that route, you'll likely see one or more of these kind of discussion items or decision points on each agenda for many months to come. Again, that's kind of summarize the process. We'll have additional information on the schedule and strategy and approach again in May. So adopting the principles really gets the ball rolling for this engagement, and I ask for your approval or your comments and suggestions to edits for the principles that are in the attachment to your document. So that ends my report, Madam Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ross. Again, as Ross mentioned, the ad hoc committee felt it was appropriate to forward this to the full board rather than going through both separate committees, because that way we can have a unified discussion instead of two separate discussions. It just makes sense that we all hear the same comments. And so the suggestion from the ad hoc committee is that we look at these principles, decide if there's any tweaking or direction we want to give relative to the principles, which have been pretty well scrutinized by the ad hoc committee, and then give direction to our staff to go back and bring us a work plan and a schedule for how we might go forward toward a possible November ballot measure. The key here is that we are actually lining this up in sync with getting prepared for the 2017 regional transportation plan that MTC is putting together. And to the best extent that we can, we'd like to have that be one process rather than two separate ones. It just sort of makes sense. that we not have two separate processes. So that was sort of the intent from the ad hoc committee. Are there any other ad hoc committee members that wanted to make comments about the process before we open it up to general questions? Seeing none. Newell?
Well, to just first off start to thank the ad hoc committee for sort of helping vet this. I think it's a good idea that through this process it actually comes to this group, because this is who we are. It's kind of like deciding we're all getting married, and are we all going to wear blue tuxes or black tuxes? We all need to have that, I could say dresses, but sitting next to a bunch of guys. So, the point is I think it's important that every voice is heard and every perspective, because we all represent different groups. And I think it's important that as we go along the process, that if we say, you know what, we need to tweak that, I think the tweak ought to come here. And I think in the long run, because some of us were involved on outside, sitting on a little committee trying to influence how Measure J came together, and I think it would serve us well that we continue to vet it at this level and not through a committee level. And I think the committee got us.
Let me be clear, not through the admin and planning committee, or not through the ad hoc committee? I think the ad hoc committee is adding value, personal opinion.
No, it did.
To get stuff ready for this body.
Yeah, but I'm sort of saying that. But I'm also
Okay.
saying that the real decisions about this
Absolutely.
and how it's shaped should all be here and not go through committees. And if there's a need for an ad hoc committee, then okay. But I think what you've got us to this point is to get us to a fair and level playing field.
Right.
But I think it's important because if you remember last time, there were some very small groups that, we thought we had a deal, and whoosh, they're off in a room. And those meetings till 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning didn't serve the public in the best interest. They served a group, and it's because we weren't having, we didn't have the ability at that time to have a conversation.
Unified conversation.
Yeah, so I think it's good because if you have an opinion, boy, let's get it on the table and not wait till the end of it. So I think the principles are all good. The only thing, and maybe this is a detail, but here we are on the cusp of new technologies. And what's absent from these, it doesn't mention anything about embracing, we still are talking roads, pavements, streets, bikes, buses, as opposed to technology. And I think technology, over the life of this next one, is going to be a huge solution in a lot of ways. Think about driving down the road, and all of a sudden all the lights come on and it says, please slow to 35. We're going to clear something ahead. And all the road sensors, your car gives you a message. And then, by the way, you'll still arrive at this time. And then it starts metering it. Right now, they don't really do it. They post and say, oh, it's an hour away to the airport. But there are technologies out there that people are thinking about. So I would just like to make sure if one of our principles are to embrace and look at technologies that will help movement of goods and people and create safety. It doesn't quite say that. Maybe
That's
it's
right.
implied, but I think it would be something worth. And here we are starting our own,
Momentum.
yeah, go momentum. Wow, let's put it somehow to integrate, not necessarily that as a title, but the fact
Right.
is embracing technologies and exploring those as investments.
Okay. Staff heard that?
Yes.
Work on incorporating that into the principles. Don?
So I would agree that it makes sense for the ad hoc committee to continue to bring things up. And it may be that in some cases what the ad hoc committee brings to us are a set of questions. And we
Yes.
need guidance on, do we go left or right or up or down or whatever. And in some cases they bring drafts that we consider. So I think that makes sense rather than going to each of the two standing committees. And I also like the principles. I sort of put myself through a test of saying, imagine that I was, one of us or was going to make a pitch to a local organization to talk about at an early stage the principles that's guiding our delivery of the TEP. And they all work pretty well with the exception of two, where I'd like to suggest some tweaking. The first one was with the balanced approach. Balanced approach is fine. It's the combination of words thereafter that for me got somewhat muddled. And I'm not sure that I have the right categories, but what I broke it into was that we want widespread benefits to all people and regions. We want to be forward-thinking so that we are doing a plan that incorporates what technology can offer us, to follow on with Newell's point, and it recognizes the demographic and developmental changes that will occur in the county. and that we want to be environmentally sensitive, which is the issue of maintaining VMT miles, things like that. And I'm not sure that there's a good single collective noun for all of that, or whether we actually create another category. And then in the public health one, I think it's important that we look at public health. I'd like a policy that talks about, so what are we going to do as a result, in addition to observing that there's a link? And basically what this principle does is we recognize that there's a link, but there's no guidance. So just two comments.
Yes, Chris.
Yeah, a couple of comments. I want to agree with the gentleman's comment about technology. For example, with Measure J, we funded a bunch of charging stations. In the next 20 years, it's quite possible that there will be a need for a whole bunch of hydrogen fueling stations. California Energy Commission is paying for some of those. Toyota is. That may not work at all, but come 5 or 10 years from now, that may be a need to do. The other thing is sort of branches off what this gentleman just said. I really urge, and I will send out copies, the staff to look at the Cleveland Forest versus Sandag opinion, because that states that as a matter of law, one of your primary principles has got to be the reduction of vehicle miles traveled. And that's not really addressed here. And I think that opinion makes it quite clear that that is the primary purpose of such efforts. And it's currently at the Supreme Court, and I know that, but they only took it up to deal with the 2050 issue, not the rest of the opinion. And so I think that staff needs to be directed to take a look at that opinion, and it's either a new category or as you suggested, maybe some rewording of one of your existing categories, but that needs to be in there.
I think it's there in the balanced approach where we talk about vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions, and supporting the transportation for livable communities. That is in there under number 5, but it may not be worded as strongly as you're suggesting. So it looks like from Don's suggestion and even from Newell's, we need to rework that one a little bit and maybe break it into a couple of points. Ross?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to add a little response to that, and I appreciate your comments. I left out of my verbal report. It's in the staff report about the relationship of the TEP and the RTP, and that's actually where that will be coordinated. One of the steps that staff is currently discussing right now is how we incorporate the TEP into an environmental impact report that would be ultimately part of the CTP, and I'm going to stop with the acronyms, but the various plans that we'll be doing. So if it's not explicitly in here, it will be in the analysis that we do for the other plans.
I've had discussions with my friends in education as to whether transportation or education has more incomprehensible acronyms to people who are not in the business.
We'll take them.
Yeah. Okay, other comments? Karen?
I'm not real clear with Dawn's comment on number 5, because I think all of the things that have been discussed are in here. So you want stronger language? You want different language?
I want greater clarity. As I read it, and then it said, imagine trying to explain this to somebody.
Okay.
The sentence structure didn't work for me.
Okay, so it's more the way it's written than
Right.
what
Yes.
is written. All
Right.
right, thank you.
Yeah, and the whole idea of some of these principles is these are the ones that our consultants will be going out to our stakeholders to start to talk to them and have a conversation about what they think is important and what principles we have set down as kind of our parameters to start this process and to get feedback from them. By the time we're done, these may evolve a little bit, but this is sort of the launching pad. Yeah, so
So are we tweaking principles?
I think we're giving direction to staff to adjust them somewhat, yes. And the ad hoc committee is scheduled to meet again on Friday, so they very well may be able to hammer out something that is far more clear. We ran out of time last time, I think, before we got them any further than this. David?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few things. I mean, I think, first of all, well done in getting us to this point. I think the concept of the principles and the way that it's outlined and structured is generally speaking, really well done. It captures what I think is the inherent conflict, the inherent challenge in the balancing act that is what we do here, and what we're trying to do between both maintaining the existing infrastructure that we have, enhancing the infrastructure and mobility of goods and people, while at the same time being, highly sensitive to the alternate modes of transportation beyond the sort of common ones, trying to facilitate, if you will, social change by encouraging people to do more bicycling and walking and those sorts of things. And it is a very difficult balancing act in what is a shockingly quickly growing county with numerous regions that have different ideas, different strengths, different challenges in and among them. So I just wanted to say that, pick up on a couple of other points. One from that Newell was making. I like the idea of bringing to this body as a whole all of the decisions, all of the principles, all of those sorts of things, because one of the great joys of this body and the CCTA as a whole has been the non-political, depoliticized nature of what we have done over a long number of years, and it's almost impossible to sort of keep that out of it as you talk about going to a ballot box. But gosh, I hope we continue in that spirit and don't fall victim to the attempts to politicize this stuff, because I think we do a heck of a lot of really good work working together in a non-politicized fashion. The cities working together, the regions working together, the county working together with all of us, and so on. It's so vital to our long-term common interest that I want to make sure we maintain that. To that end, and speech over shortly, I do think the idea of strengthening number 5 is important. Considering the impact to me, just to sort of be blunt as I am about these things, felt a little too much like kissing my sister. Love her, love kissing her. It's not creepy or weird, but it doesn't really say ultimately what I think we're trying to say here, which is we don't want to just consider it. We don't want to ponder our navels, right? What we want to do is do this balanced approach that still seeks to have us meet the mandates that we have with respect to vehicle model traveled reduction and greenhouse gas reduction. And so I think we just need to be more definitive and firm in stating that that's really what we're going to be looking at as we try to do the balance. We want to maintain and in fact enhance the infrastructure, but ultimately the idea is reduce vehicle miles traveled, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, make sure we're complying with state and federal mandates, all of which supports the other ideas that we've got embedded in here. So I would just say it. And then last to Commissioner Peoples' comment, I think it was you. I think the idea realistically is just call it out, not accounting for future demographics and technological change and innovation. I think it's chase it, advance it, embrace it. You got to have those kinds of action-oriented components to this, because I think if you're just accounting for it, you're following, not leading. And what we've already begun to do with the Momentum and other activities that we've engaged in, it's actually about leading in this direction, not following. And then last but not least, what I'll say is on the public health piece, since with another one of my lives, I've spent a good bit of my time doing that, I think it can't be overstated how important what we do with transportation is with respect to overall public health. And so I think 6, sort of like I was saying about 5, it feels a little too feel-goody without enough meat around it. And I think we can do a little bit better job of strengthening that language to make the tie clear, that we actually think that having a more vital flowing operational transportation system, doing all the things we're doing, clean vehicles, keeping traffic moving instead of sitting there puking out, dark stuff into the sky, sitting at stoplights, all of those things are actually public health benefits. And so I think we ought to be more definitive in how to say it. That's all I got.
Thanks, David. Candace?
Yes, and I was going to talk a little bit about process-wise as well, and I appreciate all the comments we've had sitting on the ad hoc committee for the last, however, almost a year we've been doing this. I think these are all very good comments, very helpful, and I like the idea of us bringing major, or all decisions really back here to the full Transportation Authority. Some of the feedback I'm getting from the county is ensuring that we have staff input, because to date, we have not really had a lot of staff input for the TEP as we move forward, and I think it's going to be very important, as we did with Measure C and Measure J, that we do have our experts from our various agencies weighing in on some of these more specific priorities that we're going to be establishing. And then the county, of course, is a major partner in this and was previously, through Measure J, it's going to be working its way through some of our own committees, such as our Transportation Water Infrastructure Committee, and I want to make sure we have that dialogue with the authority so that we're very clear on the county's role, since we're the ones that ultimately need to, Karen and I need to make sure we've got a full board, at least 4 members of the board, putting it on the ballot if that's the direction we ultimately decide to go. And then similarly, ensuring that we have that same partnership in the outreach to the community. So I just want to make very clear that our county staff needs to feel that they're a part of this as well.
Ross, you want to talk a little bit about the interaction with staff that we've had so far and where that would go and what that process would be?
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment, so that's a perfect segue, and I don't think I'm going to ask for some concurrence from the board, and I don't know that it needs to be part of the motion. That's really going to start tomorrow. So tomorrow I'm going to go to the CSAC, another acronym, I don't even know what it stands for. City
California
County
State Association of Counties.
No.
No, it's a different CSAC.
That's different CSAC?
It's Public Works, mainly it's the Public Works folks from all the cities in the county. So they
They're
meet.
part of CSAC. They're under our umbrella.
Yeah, it's the same.
No, it's the City County Engineers Group. Is that
Yes,
who you're talking about?
that's it.
Yes.
City County
It's different.
Engineers
Yeah.
Advisory Committee.
Yes.
City County Engineers Advisory Committee. So we'll begin that discussion tomorrow. I've already, Bill Gray and I have been invited to WICTAC at their meeting this month. We'll likely get asked to get on the agendas for the other RTPCs prior to your next meeting. At least for the CSAC meeting tomorrow and with WICTAC, I've distributed the staff reports that have been in the March and April meetings, so we'll certainly report on the discussion that's occurred here, summarize that. I expect that the edited version, taking your input, will come back to you in May, but I would like to get your concurrence that we can go out and talk in general about, we like the principles, and here's a few comments that we received in the discussion tonight. But yeah, we've really, other than general discussion, we've really been waiting to get this document out so that we can use this to galvanize support. My belief and hope going through the process is that as we talk to folks, we're probably starting at the 70 to 80% on what we agree, and we're really just trying to fill in the rest. I think we all share very common objectives, have common needs, and I think we'll come together very quickly on that base, and then we're just trying to figure out how, what are the varying other needs that we have and which ones provide the most benefit.
Okay. Any other comments? Candace, did you have another comment? Okay. That's okay. That's okay. Joel.
Thank you, Julie. I think it's a good list. I just wanted to highlight, at least from our perspective, number 4, the importance of reinvesting in the transportation network, not just the agency that I represent, but transportation, both alternative transportation and roads, is such a critical part. If we don't reinvest and maintain what we have, the rest of the objectives are really at risk because there simply won't be an ability to expand. So if this is in some order of priority,
No.
then I'm fine with where it is. But I think from the standpoint of an aging infrastructure, again, BART is a prime example of an aging infrastructure, but we're not the only example of systems that are getting old that need to have major reinvestments if they want to continue to provide the service as an alternative to the single occupancy vehicle.
Right. Okay. Any other comments? Do I have a motion to give direction to staff?
So I would move that we.
Oh, public comment first. Anybody in the public want to comment? Okay, we'll bring it back here, and I'll entertain a motion. Don?
So I would move that we thank staff and the ad hoc committee for putting this together, that we indicate that the authority's preference is that the ad hoc committee continue to bring things to the full authority, and that we ask the committee to take the comments you've heard tonight regarding the draft principles and incorporate them in the next version.
I'd second that. But to add to it that we've given direction to staff on at least 2 items to tweak and strengthen.
Well, that was the.
Okay.
And to bring back a schedule and a work
plan,
process for the next year and a half or so.
Yeah, that's the brief motion.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Okay, all right, we have a motion from Tats and a second from Hudson. Any further comment from the board? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, on to the regular agenda items. The first item there is our legislative update, and we're going to look to Mark or Lindsay? Both of you. All right. Lindsay, you can kick it off.
Good evening, Commissioners. Transportation continues to be a much discussed topic at both the federal and state levels, and we're working very hard to be part of that conversation. I won't steal anyone's thunder since staff just got back from Washington, D.C., and I know you may hear some reports on that later from some commissioners and executive staff, so I will let them report out on those meetings. But you may have also seen in your handout that we participated in the National Stand Up for Transportation Day last year. The Bay Area hosted an event, and our team was part of that. But there has definitely been quite a bit of legislative activity at the state level, even since the Administration and Projects Committee meeting, which those of you on that committee are used to seeing our state advocate, Mark Watson, hearing him give updates, but since he doesn't always attend the full board meeting and there's so much happening, we thought that we would invite him to come give you a brief update on some of the items that are moving very quickly.
Thank you, Lindsay, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. At the last APC meeting, we had a matrix of about 71 bills that we're watching carefully for you. Out of that mix, there was one where the committee made a recommendation to support in concept, which is SB 321, that deals with the Board of Equalization annual price setting for the second 18 cents a gallon fuel tax, and a letter's been drafted and is being prepared to move forward on that. I was also asked to briefly touch on an emerging bill, AB 1098. It has been in print for several weeks but has not been set for hearing yet. This is a measure that addresses and refocuses the emphasis of the congestion management program. And I won't go into a lot of details, but I know staff and others have been very interested in this measure. Essentially, it takes away the emphasis on LOS as a metric for the CMP and, acronyms, level of service measurements would be deleted from the responsibility of the CMP, and instead it would be replaced with metrics to deal with greenhouse gas reduction, PED, bike, and other alternative forms. The real challenge is that the monitoring that will be the responsibility of the CMA, or the CMA, Congestion Management Agency, will be more focused on how is the new plan with the new metrics doing with respect to meeting VMT reduction goals in the RTP. So that's going to be the real focus of interest in that bill. I'll keep Lindsay apprised if that bill gets set or not, just so we can track it very closely. Just 2 quick notes, and I have one I want to finish on. The quick notes were there's the Hot Lane bill that's sponsored by the Self-Help County Coalition, Mr. Frazier's AB 194. Cleared the first committee, Assembly Trans, in real good shape. There was 1 no vote, but that was reflective of Orange County concerns about Caltrans doing things in their county that they're not happy about, not so much about the structure of the bill. So congratulations to Mr. Frazier. It's a long time coming. We almost had a shot last year, but I think his bill is going to be the one that emerges through the process. In addition, there was another major tussle, and again, with the leadership of Chairman Frazier, the extension of the public-private partnership legislation, which simply extends the date indefinitely and actually now to 2030, was moved against strong opposition by the Caltrans professional engineers who had wanted to insert a number of requirements for the state to do work that RTAs would be doing with their P3 partners. So really remarkable job and leadership by Chairman Frazier. I had it at 50-50 going in, and we came out real well. The hottest news today is SB 16, Senator Bell's measure that would add, supplement basically roadway and state highway preservation funding by somewhere between $3 and $3.5 billion annually. It includes a 10-cent a gallon tax, gas tax, or fuel tax increase, and that's intended to make up for the lost purchasing power since the last increase was put in place back in 1994. It includes recovering the late fees that have been dedicated for general obligation bond debt service for the general fund benefit, and that's about $1 billion. The 10 cents a gallon raises about $1.5 billion. And it includes a $35 increase in the vehicle reg fee. And in addition, it has a surcharge of $100 for electric vehicles. The idea there is someday in the future there may be a migration towards a road user charge, and you want to have all the vehicles having some skin in the game as you move towards that, and that's the way to do it. It's not a punitive measure aimed at the electric vehicle, but it is in play, and we'll see how that fares. And lastly, there is a very small but increasing amount of VLF. It starts out at 0.07% a year. Over 5 years, the fifth year would reach 0.35%, and that would bring the grand total of VLF between the local VLF and this new one to 1%, so still half of what it had been historically. That money would be used to offset the impact of moving the weight fees away from transportation. So it roughly mirrors the transition between the two. He also is going to be featuring, if it's not in the bill, we haven't seen it in print yet, a major effort to direct Caltrans to come up with a plan to generate savings and then plow those savings back into programs. So there are other ideas being floated, but that's a quick summary of the bill, and it hasn't been set for committee hearing yet, but I expect in 2 weeks. His office asked me to come by and sit down and ask him, what do we do now? We have the bill going. What are our next steps to develop the coalition? So we'll be working with others on that. And that would complete my report.
Wonderful. Any questions for Mark?
Oh,
We're moving in the right direction.
If I may just amend, because I don't want to overlook the other House. The Speaker has her proposal she released in February. Chairman Frazier is working in collaboration with her, and we expect a release of a similar scoped bill as Senator Bell's. I don't know about the makeup, but similar in scope, probably in the next week or so.
Thank you very much. Through the chair.
Yes.
Mark, and forgive me, I was listening so much to you, I missed the part. I guess the part, how much money are we chatting about on putting on vehicle registrations? Yeah,
Okay.
there was a lot of money.
In aggregate?
Yeah, could you kind of,
Well,
because you mentioned a couple things.
yeah, let me just be
One of
real-
them was 35, and
Yeah,
there
I'm
were
sorry.
100. Pretty soon I'm going to trade my car.
Okay. So a flat $35 per vehicle registration fee increase dedicated to state and highway maintenance and preservation. That's one element. The other element was a VLF increase that not necessarily will be going to transportation, but because of its historical tie to general funds, is going to be available for the general fund to offset the impact of the transfer of the weight fees back to transportation. It would increase 0.07% per year until it reached 0.35% of the value of a vehicle. And then electric is separate with a $100 surcharge to bring them into the game. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. And Lindsay, did you have anything from the federal side, or are you going to wait until later and let Randy do that? All righty, very good, very good. All right, the next item on our agenda is 4B8. This is the presentation of the I-680 Corridor System Management Plan Operations Analysis Results. And it looks like Matt's going to be handling this one, or at least kicking it off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. We're here tonight to present the results from the Caltrans-led Corridor System Management Plan, or CSMP, for the Interstate 680 corridor in Contra Costa County. This tonight caps off almost a 3-year process that sought to provide a vision for the future of the 680 corridor by testing various improvements and incorporating a more multimodal analysis as part of Caltrans's next generation of CSMPs, which you'll hear about, for which Contra Costa served as the pilot case. CCTA expects the results of the plan to be incorporated into future planning and programming efforts by the authority, including the completion of the countywide transportation plan and the development of the TEP that you just heard about, as well as the I-680 transit and congestion relief study that's kicking off, and various bike and pedestrian studies along the corridor. So I'd like to introduce Eric Alm to my left. He led the effort for Caltrans District 4's Office of System and Regional Planning. And Tara Katada, who's also to my left, from System Metrics Group, who's the consultant who actually prepared the plan, and he's going to walk us through the findings. Tara?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for inviting me here. I know time is of the essence with this board, so I'll go very quickly and be open for questions. We'll give you. Okay, I'm already losing some of my time, all right. So I'll give you a very brief study overview, give you a hint of the complete streets analysis we've done, and go through scenario evaluation and conclusions. For those of you who were not involved with Prop 1B, the corridor system management plans were required by the California Transportation Commission for any corridors such as I-80, ICM, that got Prop 1B corridor mobility improvement account money. This is the second generation CSMP, and what CSMPs were originally meant to do is say, if you're going to get an investment from the state, show us that you're going to maintain the benefits that you're getting from this investment. This time, Caltrans decided to add a few wrinkles to the consulting team, one of which is to add the smart mobility frameworks using different performance measures than just highway-centric performance measures, add a complete streets component to the corridor system management plan that takes into account bike and ped, and also use a new simulation tool developed by UC Berkeley that was actually started funding when Director Iwasaki was at Caltrans. So I'll show you a little bit of each. The study area is the 680 from south of the 580 interchange up to the Benicia Bridge. It includes a lot of the arterials parallel and crossing the 680 as well as the Iron Horse Trail. We had a lot of stakeholder meetings. We had a staff working group with Caltrans, Matt, MTC, and UC Berkeley, but I presented to many committees outside of that, and I recognize several of you in different committees that we've presented to. The stakeholders gave us a couple of questions up front. They said one is, we are tired of the diversion on local streets that's due to congestion on the freeway, so tell us whatever improvements you have, how do they impact diversion? And the other one, given the impending ramp metering project that's going to eventually happen on the 680, they wanted to understand how much backup on the local streets these ramp metering projects will create. Just so you know, we're not highway focused. We included transit, park, and ride. We looked at land use, we looked at the various trip generators, but we also looked at the freeway facilities. Complete streets, our team went to all your arterials surrounding the 680. This is just a first cut of all the arterials that had freeway interchanges where you could either walk across the freeway or bike across the freeway. Then there were other arterials that were crossing the freeway underneath it that were not part of interchanges. We looked at shared use path, including the Iron Horse Trail, but a lot of others as well. And then finally, we looked at the parallel arterials across. And the complete streets analysis identified many opportunities for improving these arterials, both for bike and ped. And if you're interested, the report shows all the opportunities. The Smart Mobility Framework looked at other measures besides level of service or just freeway-centric measures. We looked at reliability, we looked at emissions, we did look at user costs, greenhouse gas emissions, and mode share. And that graph on the left shows you the mode share in and around the 680 corridor, and is still dominated by drive-alongs, although it does have almost a 9% carpool and almost a 9% transit mode share. Okay, so usually when you look at corridor projects, you look at alternatives. You look at alternative 1, the highway-centric, alternative 2, the transit-centric, alternative 3, the hybrid. This is actually not trying to do that. It's looking at all your projects that are either programmed or planned and look at the evolution of how the corridor will perform as we implement these projects. This CSMP is not trying to find the next $1 billion investment on the 680. It's actually trying to tell you how it's going to evolve over time, and if there are some low-hanging fruit to identify those. So scenario 1, as you can see, is near-term projects that are already programmed. These include the first phase of the express lane. Scenario 2 include the second phase of the express lane as well as ramp metering. Then scenario 3 includes all the other planned projects down the line. And then scenario 4, we had to identify some additional improvements that we found in one of your previous studies. And for those of you who are talking about VMT reduction, we also ran a scenario that said, what if we could reduce VMT by 1.5% as a result of bike and ped activities? Last but not least, we looked at incident management improvements, and I'll go through that in a second. The way we evaluated these scenarios is twofold. One, we used your model to do a comprehensive analysis that looks at things such as diversion and total delay and so forth. But for the freeway, to look at bottlenecks, at the impact of ramp metering, at the impacts on bottlenecks, we used the TOPL model that I alluded to earlier. So the comprehensive analysis showed us this. This is a map where everything yellow, green, or light green shows you where you're going to have less congestion if you implement all the projects that are in the pipeline. The red shows you where you're going to have a little bit more congestion. And the reason you see some red on the freeways is that as the freeway performance improves, fewer vehicles are going to divert on the arterials and they're going to use the freeway instead. So at those locations where they're going to enter the freeway, we see some of those red increased congestion. Bottom line is we're going to have less diversion to arterials as a result of these improvements. And I'll jump now to the more detailed traffic analysis. This green screen here is ideal condition. It's called a speed contour map. The horizontal axis is time of day. The vertical axis is direction. And anything green tells you you're going at free flow speed or close to it. I'm sure most of you have not experienced that on the 680 during the peak conditions. This is what it actually looked like in 2012, 2013, and I fully understand by now things have gotten worse, but if you look at the direction of travel northbound, this is during the PM, the afternoon peak, you go through three distinct, very big bottlenecks. One is at Crow Canyon, one is at El Cerro, and then the big one that I had the pleasure of driving through this afternoon is the North Main Lawrence bottleneck. So let's see how the different projects you have programmed will impact these bottlenecks. Lo and behold, when you have that aux lane that you just delivered and the express lane phase 1, I'll just go back and forth so you can see the difference, that Crow Canyon bottleneck will almost disappear, the El Cerro will get very small, but the North Main Lawrence bottleneck will get worse, partly because the flow will improve. So as the flow improves, the downstream bottlenecks get worse. That's unfortunate, but exactly. When you do your ramp metering and the second phase of the express lane, that's all that remains in the short term. A small bottleneck at North Main Lawrence. Lo and behold, though, if we go to 2025 demand levels projected by your model, not by us, this is what the original one would look like without any projects. As you see, the Crow Canyon and El Cerro bottlenecks get really large. You put in the first phase of the express lane, it gets better, but the El Cerro, Pintado, Crow Canyon become one major bottleneck. And then even after scenario 2, which is the second phase of the express lane, we have quite a bit of congestion northbound during the PM. So that's why we looked at the auxiliary lanes that were identified by a previous Contra Costa study and put that in. And if you can implement those, congestion will still be there, but as you see, a lot less red and a lot more yellow. Yellow is more 30 to 45 mile per hour as opposed to the 10, 15 that we're used to. So everything we've told you so far, and literally over $1 billion, I believe it's over $1 billion of different programmed and planned projects, that all looks at recurrent delay that happens every day based on the demand that we have. None of that looks at non-recurrent delay due to incidents, due to collisions, special events, and so on and so forth. Now, if you look at all the research out there, about 40 to 50% of all congestion is due to incidents, and yet there aren't many dollars assigned to that. So we decided to do an experiment with Topol and looked at what if we can reduce the time it would take to clear an incident by 25 minutes. And that alone would save you in the neighborhood of 300, 350 hours of delay. Now, given that you have 50 collisions per month on the 680, not to mention other incidents, that alone could save you 20,000 hours of delay. So the bottom line is, if you can pay more attention to non-recurrent delay, you'd be way better off. So overall conclusions. Near term, the projects you have perform well. They're going to continue to give you benefits. However, with ramp metering, we've identified several ramps that will need to be expanded before you can implement ramp metering, or else the traffic will be backed up to the local streets. Congestion will return in the future unless demand actually doesn't grow, but right now it's projected to grow, and it will can be somewhat mitigated with these additional auxiliary lanes. But if I leave you with one thought, and I heard many of you talking about technology, what we talk about system managing, including leveraging new technologies, is critical. And I don't think, my own opinion, this is not a reflection of Caltrans, I don't think we invest enough in that. Things like autonomous vehicles, like integrated corridor management, like connected vehicles, not only will they make it easier for the driver to know where they're going and so forth, but actually reduce accidents. Actually reduce incident clearance time and would give you a bigger benefit and reduce frustration of your travelers. And that's my 12-minute presentation, I hope.
Very good. I see lights lighting up quickly. Candace?
Yes, and thank you. I enjoyed this presentation again, because you did present it to SWAT, and this is right in the middle of my district. But one thing that was intriguing to me back then as well as now is incident management. And so did you, through this study, come up with sort of a list of best practices for incident management other than improved technology? And to Caltrans, and Randy might address this too, do we have a common discussion with our first responders about incident management? And we just had this discussion yesterday on the Board of Supervisors with our fire district of how, for safety, you know, they need to block 2 lanes of traffic with the fire engine when they respond, which of course creates an issue. CHP, of course, when they have an incident, such as they did down in San Jose the other day with someone ready to jump, you know, they had to close down the 280-101 interchange. So what is the relationship that we have with our first responders in trying to come up with a more efficient, a better way to clear our accidents and get rid of that one factor with regard to incident management?
You want to go first, or you want me to?
I can
Go
so
first,
when I first got here, I actually met the new fire chief, and we didn't get off to a great start because I was telling him, he was talking about all the accidents that he had to respond. And I said, what you need to do is you need to understand how to set up a lane closure. And you need to understand that you need tapers that are longer than you can't just on a 65-mile-an-hour freeway put a very short taper like you do in a city, and then all of a sudden traffic is supposed to divert onto another lane. And so he got kind of offended by that. So we had not a warm start to our relationship. But they've done an analysis now. Yeah, so they've done another analysis, and the consultant came in and said, they said, you don't set your lane closures up. So how you set a lane closure up, how many lanes you take directly impacts the length of congestion. And Tarek will tell you that for every minute of delay, it takes four times that to clear. So you got to pay attention to what you're doing. And then Amy wants to talk about, Hisham got his master's degree at UC Berkeley, and his thesis was a benefit cost analysis tool for this thing called Freeway Service Patrol. So
yeah, I'll be happy to pick up on that, Candace, because as you know, the white trucks that go around, those are funded through MTC's freeway, the SAFE program, the freeway, and the fact is basically probably over half the congestion that we see on our highways is because of accidents. So the faster you can clear it. The challenge with things like fatal accidents is the Highway Patrol, they control the scene, and obviously you can't, there are a lot of issues around that. But just to say, Julie is now vice chair of the MTC Operations Committee, and that's one of the things that we have continued to look at is identifying ways of increasing the incident management capacity, particularly in these compacted corridors. And just to add, thank you for that presentation. We really got the full semester review last week, and I think with a couple of MIT and Stanford engineers in the room, you got a lot of good questions. But one of the things I think that incident management can do is that a lot of these investments are a long way off and they're expensive, and I think we really, from an authority standpoint, need to be looking really significantly at how we can get additional resources into that corridor to be able to deal with incident management. There was an accident today on 24 coming out here. So I don't know if you also want to talk about, from your perspective, and the analysis of how that might, because I think Candace's question is really very essential in terms of how we can work right now to improve.
So for full disclosure, the SWAT folks actually found a mistake in our analysis, and we had to go back and change the report. So the Stanfordites and the MIT folks got us. Having said that,
no, the Berkeley person was happy. But
we did not develop a best practices, but you currently have one of the areas that you can look at is the AD ICM. That's a way to deal better with incident management. And again, for full disclosure, we're the before and after consultants. We're subcontractors to Parsons. And it will be very interesting to see how that works. It's kind of working in San Diego. Some people will say it's working great, but I think they're still working on that. The AD will be another example where they show you the speed, slow down ahead, as somebody earlier mentioned. The other good news is that technology is reducing accidents, and that connected vehicles is really going to reduce accidents significantly and increase your capacity. That may not be good news for those of us who don't want VMT to grow, but once the capacity increases, it's going to be easier to drive. Now it's going to be driving with lower emissions per mile, but it will be driving. So I say leverage technology, work with connected vehicles, but also I don't know why any major urban corridor in California does not have an ICM plan, an integrated corridor management plan that helps drivers figure their way out of accidents.
Newell?
First of all, thank you. I appreciate the comments in the study. This is the first time I've seen it, and I heard from our SWAT representative. Obviously, in the 680 corridor now, once the auxiliary lanes were open about a year ago, so your study's behind, but it proves exactly there. It verifies what you predicted. We just moved the problem further north.
Exactly.
But what I didn't see, and to me this has been fundamental, actually the second highest cause of traffic congestion are HOV lanes that end.
That end
because
nowhere, right?
They
Yeah.
end nowhere. So we have a northbound.
back in.
Yeah, exactly.
So they end, and all of a sudden you collapse a lane. So that's it. And then we have the northbound. So all of the stuff we've done on 680 didn't fix the root problem, which is going through Walnut Creek, where you drop the HOV, you drop a lane, and then because we're going to merge with 24, we drop 2 lanes.
Yeah.
So the funnel theory is you put a couple boulders in the river, and it's going to back up.
Yeah.
And I know we're trying to brainstorm how to fix that, but there's nothing in what you've looked at, unless you can find a solution for it, because nobody has yet. All those other things don't really fix that. So doing ramp metering is going to punish some of the other communities don't have a problem that are further south. So ramp metering will make it great for David, who wants to work in Pleasanton and drive to Pleasant Hill, and you'll punish the communities in between where he's going, because most of the traffic is you're going to punish them to create capacity to try to relieve a problem that's up north that isn't being solved. So what I'm saying is all well and good, great tool. I'm a little skeptical. It's like when we're getting rid of LOS, level of service. The honest truth, from my seat, we got rid of level of service because it said that intersection, and you can go out and look at it, is gridlocked, which means you can't build anything. Stop until you fix it. So we come up with new methodologies, and lo and behold, we still have gridlock, but all of a sudden we can build things because we call it some other name. So my skepticism, I see the tool did verify the auxiliary lane process, and there's no question it worked. You also did identify, we've noticed, and you can ask David, because he does this every day, that for the past 18 months, the response time for Caltrans has dropped like this. So we have emergency services on scene. All they can do is block traffic. They can't clear. They can clear the injuries, but they can't clear the scene because that's not in their scope of work. So it would be to modify that model and show if you had rapid response teams, and other than fatalities, you should be able to clean anything up in about 2 hours if you put the resources to it. And it's the best investment because you could put response teams on these corridors that have those consistent accidents, and we now know where they are. Mathematically, it's the cheapest thing you can do. You can't pave your way out of those problems. But we somehow have slower response times than we used to.
Let me respond to a couple of things. So I absolutely agree with 99% with what you said, except for ramp metering, because I've seen it work. And yes, it does punish some people. You get an extra minute or two at the wait time, but it actually reduces accidents and it improves overall flow. And if you improve the overall flow, I agree with you, you're still going to get stuck at the downstream bottleneck. But the peak period is going to collapse. So instead of having a 5-hour or 4-hour peak period, very often we see it going down to 3.5 hours or 3 hours. Be that as it may, if you look at how much money we're spending on capital projects versus how much money we're spending on operating and responding to incidents and response team, it's literally laughable. It's not even 1/100th of what we're spending on capital projects. And for the life of me, I don't understand why they don't do exactly what you say. Why don't they put some more money into operations and less money into capital projects? But there, as some of you may have seen, John Oliver on HBO, where he said it's not sexy, so nobody does it unless they have the ribbon cutting.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Tom?
Well, Newell said he was a little skeptical, but I'm highly skeptical. As a matter of fact, I'm the skeptic in chief of corridor system management plans. I will accept the premise that a lot of these improvements may reduce congestion and have a lot of positive benefits over a very short term. But I think in the end, I'm just skeptical that any of them are really getting us to a better place than we are now. I think they're going to make things worse. And, I'm no transportation engineer, but I've got pretty good intuition. And what I think is going to happen is, and I've said this before, if you start tweaking the freeways with all these bells and whistles and technology and that kind of thing, you know, the idea is you want to reduce congestion, speed people on their way, but at the end of the day, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with more people on the freeway. Oh, there you go. So, you know, Newell said you can't pave your way out of these problems, and I don't think you can tweak your way out of them either. Again, what I think is going to happen is every time you make it easier for somebody to go from point A to point B on a freeway, which is your goal. You're talking about making it easier for people to go places, pulling them off the local streets onto the freeways. And so what's going to happen is you're going to end with more people on the freeways. They're just going to keep coming until it's as crowded and congested as it is today. And that's not going to reduce vehicle miles traveled. It's going to increase vehicle miles traveled. So I think that's going to be the end result. Take a look at what would happen if you did just the opposite, just as a scenario. Of course, this isn't going to happen, but what if you announced tomorrow that we're going to shut down half the lanes on all the freeways? Just going to do it. And so all of a sudden what's going to happen is people are no longer going to be able to get from where they want to. They're not going to be able to get from point A to point B on the freeway. So they're going to start clamoring for other solutions. They're going to start riding BART. They're going to start riding ferry boats. They're going to look for a place to live closer to where they work so they can ride their bicycle. They're going to demand public transit. They're going to demand bus rapid transit. You know, if they've only got 2 lanes left on the freeway, they're going to demand we put BRT on one of those and they can get on an express bus and go to San Francisco. And that, you know, in terms of vehicle miles traveled and in terms of saving energy and saving greenhouse gases and all that kind of stuff, that's going the right direction. This kind of project is just making it worse. And I've never understood it, you know. Everybody thinks this is the greatest thing in the world, but it's backwards. It's just going to ultimately it's going to make life worse for everybody. And I just think it's misguided. But
So I just want to make one
I
clarification.
recognize I'm in the way low minority on this.
Believe me, we are a micro business. We have 5 employees in San Francisco. 3 of them bike to work. I fully understand what you're talking about. But I just want to make one clarification. None of these projects are our idea. All of these projects are in your books.
I'm not blaming
We
them
did
on
not
you.
make up these projects. Those are projects that are either programmed or planned by the regional
They've all heard this
agency.
from me before. So
That's right. Thank you, Tom. Dave?
Yeah, respectfully, Tom, I disagree with you. You're talking about trading VMT for VTT. And last night on the way home from the airport after 2 fairly intense days, I was greeted with another great job by whoever it was that decided they were going to work on the San Mateo Bridge, and we went down to 1 lane. And I got to tell you, I was calling whoever came up with this brilliant idea what a wonderful person you are, and everything else I could think of. I was screaming. And there are some other problems inherent with when you don't move. If you move slow, you'll put up with it. But when you don't move, you've got problems. And when you start talking about the end-of-day commute, you're talking about people who are trying to get home to families, commitments when they get there. I mean, I can't believe I had to feed this dog, and that's the only thing that bothered me. And I'm imagining what somebody's got to feed their kid. I don't think it's necessarily going the wrong way, but I do respect where you are on it if that's the only thing you're doing. Now, in that point, I would agree with. That's the only thing you're doing is just trying to, put things on the freeway. But that's the general idea. Here's the avenue for the people that want to go from A to B. What's the easiest way to get there. I wouldn't take them off the freeway only to put them on arterials, because you're just going to be delayed. But maybe it's because it's so fresh in my mind and I haven't had any sleep since that, calling all these guys a bunch of names. I had to chime in, but there's a downside to the other side of it too, and that's VTT.
If I may add, there has been a lot of market studies that show that travelers, if they hate one thing more than congestion, it's unreliable congestion, meaning you know you're congested going to the city in the morning, and it usually takes you an hour or thereabouts, but the days where it takes you 2 and 3 hours, that leaves an imprint on your mind, and that is the measure that we talked about earlier, the reliability measure, and it is does not look good for the 680.
Any other questions? David and then Randy.
Okay. It's been such a hard one, and again, with due respect, the notion that the way to solve this is to eliminate capacity so that you force people into public transit and so on feels to me like a gambit on a multi-generational social engineering conundrum that cannot really be adequately contemplated in this setting. It does. It boggles my mind, and I apologize for that. But the reality is, as long as you have commute distances of 30 to 50 to 60 miles for people, you're going to have to find really good and efficient ways to get people there. It boggles the mind for me that people commute from Tracy and Stockton and places like that to Pleasanton, and that people compute. I'm sorry? Well, I was just saying, it boggles the mind that people commute from Antioch and Brentwood to Pleasanton. It boggles the mind that people commute from those two places to San Francisco, and that people go from Pleasant Hill to Palo Alto and San Jose every day. 2-hour commutes each way. But the reality is you have an economic system that supports the notion that people will go where they think they can be adequately compensated and still maintain a standard of living and being able to live in places where they want to live. And that's why I said it's a multi-generational social engineering exercise, because you'd have to get an awful lot of people to decide that they don't want to live in your standard single-family house that's detached in a place where they have adequate space to walk and breathe without running into each other or being gagged with car exhaust. So I kind of like living in the world that deals with the people that are here and the preferences that the people here have. And what I think is a rational way that a transportation funding agency can attempt to address the issues that are real and present and that we're looking at over the reasonable lifespan that we can address. I'm all in favor of investing more heavily, and folks here have heard me say this before, in BRT and BART and the express bus system, anything that moves people more quickly and more efficiently. It's one of the reasons why, despite some of my early reservations, I supported hot lanes, or whatever we're calling them these days. But the reality is, until you have a system of public transportation that can get you from those places that I mentioned to the destinations where the job is in an hour, you're never going to get people out of their cars. You're never going to have this notion that even public transit is really the solution for everything. It hasn't been in the East Coast, where there's lots and lots of it. It hasn't been in cities in Europe. It is in some places with lower populations and lower distances. But at the end of the day, the problem itself doesn't ever go away. It just gets delayed, or it just moves further down the freeway. And hopefully we'll have more job centers in Contra Costa County that are closer to where people live, and we can end up helping to funnel funding and such from the state level and the federal level, and even to the extent we can make transportation infrastructure investments that facilitate putting jobs. I've been saying this one for probably more than a decade, getting more jobs in Brentwood and Antioch and Oakley, getting, so that you're taking people from Walnut Creek and Pleasant Hill, Concord, and even golly, San Ramon, and moving them to good, high-paying jobs out there. That's really the solution, not choking off the roadways so that people are forced into public transportation.
Thank you, David. We'll go with Randy, then Don, then Newell, then Chris, then Janet. So no long speeches, please.
I was Commissioners, I was gonna say that Tarek and I have worked together for many, many years when I was at Caltrans, and he's done this work for a long period of time. And in LA, they drive from Diamond Bar into city of Los Angeles. It's 2 hours. Yeah. And one way. They get very angry if it's 2 hours and 15 minutes, they start calling the office. Metrolink is 2 hours. It's exactly the same because of all the stops. So the way I look at the system here in Contra Costa, 680, 4, and 80, you've made your investments. They're as wide as they're probably going to be for at least as long as we're going to be on the face of the earth, once we're done with 4. So what we're trying to do, and what Tarek is trying to do, is there are things you can do to tweak that to get more efficiency out of that system, and then you make the decision of modal split. Do we run express buses? Do we raise the occupancy on the HOV lanes? And we will have the HOV lane. Ross is working on that now to extend it all the way through Walnut Creek southbound. Northbound's got another problem because of the BART column and the way Highway 24 sweeps in. We have a plan for Lawrence Way. It wasn't taken into account here because it was after the analysis. But we have to get those ideas through the subcommittees before they get to the full board. And so we work with the 4 subregions to make sure that the technical advisory committees understand what we're trying to do and what we're talking about when we look at these charts, because we're used to looking at those charts. The advisory committee members may not be used to looking at that.
Okay, Don, then Newell, then Chris, then Janet.
So I wanted to concur with a lot of what Commissioner Durant said, but the other thing I would add is, in this county, what happens is you get a job, you move in, you get a job, you choose a place that's close to home. 5 years later, you change your job, which may no longer be close to home, but now your partner or your spouse has his or her own job, which may be in the opposite direction, and so it becomes hard to move. The moving decision is not easy, and it gets sticky. And on a lighter note to Dave, so maybe the solution next time is fly in and out of Oakland, because then you could take Bart to Dublin, and the dog could have been fed on time.
Thank you, Don. Okay, Newell, then Chris, then Janet.
I just want to make one quick comment, Terry. I think this is, and aside from all our discussion, I think this is one of the best presentations I've seen.
Oh, thank you.
And I think your analysis is probably spot on. And in the fact that you took what we're planning, we might not like the answers in some case, but the fact is the majority of what you've done, because when this was started in the baseline you took, has been implemented, and it's true. I mean, it's a really good empirical model. I'd like us to hire you to update it based on the things that we're doing. Go ahead and update it now. I'm still skeptical that it would improve that well for rent metering, and I'd like to see the methodology, because I can point out some reasons why it won't have any impact from an empirical issue. But to see if we could clear the BART column issue, I know Ross has had some really wonderful ideas, out of the box thinking, but you know what, we got to figure out a way to do it and pay for it. But it'd be great to see this model updated with those, keep rent metering out for the moment, and see where we get, because we're making decisions here. We all are, we have different experience levels in transportation, and we think, oh yeah, this is the right decision. This is probably one of the better models. And I think you're also probably one of the better presenters who did it in a very short period of time. And I appreciate that, so thank you.
And we have taken far more time.
Before I take full credit for anything, this model was developed by UC Berkeley, and we had a team that included MTC, CCTA, Caltrans, and ourselves, literally giving them a hard time for 2 years until the model started spitting out decent results. So thank you, UC Berkeley. Yeah.
Chris, and then Janet.
I agree. This is one of the better presentations I've ever seen on a very complex subject. And I agree at one level with most of what Commissioner Durant said, but if we're going to talk long-term, multi-generational, et cetera, let's remember that our current system was created by public policy. It was created by the Interstate Highway Act of '57. It was created by a GI housing bill that would pay for suburban housing, would not pay for renovating urban housing. And, we've had 40 years, 50 years, 70 years of a set of public policies that are slowly changing, and I have an issue on another item that I'll bring up afterwards. But excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Janet?
Thank you. I guess I just can't resist defending the buses because I don't think there's a speaker yet, even you, Chris, who defended the buses today. I actually took a bus and BART to get here today, and I got here in a very short amount of time relative to the distance, and it was a very relaxing trip, and it was not crowded, but there are a lot of people on it, and so I think that there are those of us who actually don't view the world as being forced onto a bus, but rather view it as being a choice. And I think what I've been reading and hearing from my own personal millennium, my daughter, is that in fact there is a new world out there of people who in fact want to make different choices. And some of them in fact may be the same choices that a lot of people who are their parents have made, but a lot of people are making the choices that they don't want to have that very long commute, that they do want to live in an urban space. And I think that the plans that we come up with need to reflect the ability to make those choices. And I just want to remind people that it's not the end of the world to take the bus. I actually had a very pleasant experience on my bus today. It did. And I just have to then repeat that I went to visit my daughter in Lake County, and she took me to Calistoga, which, if any of you have been there, is not exactly 5 minutes away by car. And I got home on the Vine. It went directly from Calistoga to El Cerrito del Norte. Now, I mean, you know, so it is possible to have a very nice experience on the bus and get where you want to go in a timely manner. So I guess I would like to, since I maybe have the opportunity to close this discussion, point out that a lot of it's about choices. You know, we need to all have choices. And with that, I'll say I'm finished.
Thanks, Janet. I think that is actually a very good way to end because it is about choices. The problem is many of us don't have choices, and the car is the only choice we have because we don't have transit of any kind.
And I don't have a choice either.
Right, exactly. And so you're limited, and so are many of the rest of us. So, and you know, we'll be looking at that as we go forward over the next year, how we can provide more choices. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was really good. I think every one of us enjoyed it very, very much. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is correspondence and communications.
Can I break in before we get to correspondence?
Yes, Chris.
Yeah, I apologize. I want to raise an issue about 2B7. I didn't realize that was consent calendar. I'm learning how to deal with your calendar.
Okay.
Part of the definition of PDAs, as One Bay Area has talked about it, is transit service. And I see nothing in your PDA analysis that talks about providing the operating funds necessary to provide the minimum transit service that MTC defines as necessary for creating a PDA. And I have asked my staff to come up with an analysis for all the PDAs in our district, and I meant to send out an email earlier this week, and I haven't, but I will be doing that to all of the Bus Transit Coordinating Committee members. But I would encourage your staff to take a look at that piece of PDAs and see how it can be worked into your analysis of PDAs.
Thank you. I suspect that as we go forward with our transportation plan and as we go forward with our work through the Plan Bay area, I can tell you as president of ABAG that ABAG and the Regional Transportation Plan, or the Regional Planning Committee, are looking constantly at the PDAs and whether they actually have adequate transportation to qualify as a PDA. That is one of the major criteria about whether they're designated as a PDA. Bus service does qualify, planned or funded. And so, yes, they will continue to be analyzed, but the local jurisdictions are responsible for making sure that that happens. Now, there has to be money for that to happen. And certainly, we all know what's happened to the operating funds for many of our bus services. They have been slashed horribly, and it doesn't look like it's getting better, it's getting worse. So those are going to continue to be things that we look at, but it isn't just the Transportation Authority that is responsible for providing those funds. That really is a bigger scale picture, and that is a regional picture, that is a national issue as well. So as we go forward, that certainly is something in our mind, but
MTC staff at the regional working group said that transportation agencies should look, that were located in one county,
Certainly.
should look to their county transportation agency for funds.
I understand
it's
exactly what.
everybody
Chris,
pitches in.
excuse me, as an MTC member as well, I have to tell you, we are looking at that, but it still is a regional issue because it is a regional transportation plan and a plan Bay Area. It's not just the responsibility of this authority to fund it. So going on to the rest of our agenda, we are into correspondence and communications. You have any questions about what's included in your packet? You have some press releases about Gomentum Station and about the Honda testing the innovative vehicle technology at the Gomentum Station. And you missed a fabulous conference if you were not there that day. It was really exciting. I think every techie in the Bay Area was at that conference for Gomentum Station, right? For those of us who were there were a lot of young entrepreneurs trying to figure out how they get their feet in the door and who could they talk to get funding and that sort of thing. It was pretty exciting stuff. So that was exciting. The next item is the associated committee reports. Those are included in your packet as well as on your dais, which takes us to commissioner and staff comments. I just have a couple of comments. As your chair and as the president of the California Association of Councils of Government, I was invited to attend the inner sanctum of the executive directors meeting of CalCog in Sacramento to see what they talk about when the rest of us board members and electeds are not around. And they have a really good meeting. There's a lot of brain power in that room, and they're working hard and doing good stuff. So we are very well represented. Randy is there on our behalf as an executive director, and that's wonderful. I was unable to attend the CalCog conference, unfortunately, to some family health issues, but I was able to be there via phone to run the board meeting, and we are doing some great stuff through CalCog as well, working statewide as an advocacy organization for transportation planning and those sorts of things, working on cap and trade, and how do we get in our regions the biggest bang for the buck out of what's out there. So there are some great things coming forward. I will forward to you, I just got this afternoon a report, a summary of the entire meeting and the conference, so I will forward that to all of you via email so that you have that. I'll probably tweet it out as well, just so that you can all see what's going on. So that was my report. Any commissioner reports? David?
Yeah, I would just say that from what I heard in the last 2 days in Washington, D.C., that if we were running an autonomous vehicle out at the Naval Weapons Station for the next 30 days and you were to call that conference 15 days later, you would have 10 times as many people at that conference.
Everybody wants a piece of it.
It is very clear that this is the new world order. So as I see, and I'd point out to you, Mr. Iwasaki, Eddie Bursan from the Concord City Council, if you don't know it, the eyes of the world are on Concord right now.
Yeah, and the opportunity for jobs is huge.
Or larger. I will just tell you that when we talk about this, and I'll just pick up one meeting, you start looking for questions and you start looking at what do the people that we go to meet ask for. And I'm not going to steal Randy's thunder on this, but it was amazing. We were in one office found out the guy that was listening was from San Ramon. They said, I want to hear what's going to happen the first time one of these things crashes. And if I did one thing right, the first thing I said is, it's my fault. Take the blame, you take some leadership, and you keep this program going, because this thing's that big. Then he said a different one. I thought he was a friend of Randy's, but he said, I want to see what happens when you put a CEO in the back seat. You run him up Highway 1 to San Simeon. And Randy volunteered to do it now.
Yeah.
The point is, we didn't hesitate. We went to a meeting. I think it was the auto workers. Well, I've never seen this before there. The place was filled.
The auto manufacturer.
Yeah, whoever it was. He'll tell you. The place was filled. There's 5 or 6 people on the phone, and usually they want to get you out of there. I don't think they want us to leave. That's what's different. There were 3 messages, and one of them that I would like to see expounded on when you get to your part. The first words out of, who was the Assistant Secretary, Mendez, whoever he was. He says, we can't lose the spectrum. I think it's important that the Planning Committee get a study, informational only report on exactly what the spectrum is again, because we do not want to send a message, any of us, that there's any doubt that we keep the spectrum, because if that goes, the autonomous vehicles go, and that's the golden goose. The other one that really had me even more worried is Randy talked about some of the delays that we have where we have to wait for a clearance or E76 or whatever it is, and the same secretary we're talking about looked like he didn't know what he was talking about, which had me a little bit concerned. And then we pushed the issue of don't get rid of the tax-exempt bonds. We need it. But I was extremely impressed. I thought that it went very well, but what has me concerned is all the goodwill, all that everybody wanted to be a part, wanted to know what was going on, could all go away when we go back next year if we haven't moved on from this point. Somehow, some way, like yesterday, we need a car running around Concord. Not necessarily on the street, but it's got to be on the Naval Weapons Station. It's got to be moving forward because everybody's going to want this. There are other people that are in play here, and if we lose this, we should all be shot because it affects all of us.
Yeah, and what David is referring to is the trip back to Washington, D.C., our annual lobbying trip. And fortunately, David was able to go because, as I said, I had to bow out due to some family health issues. But the rest of our team went, and from what I hear, did a great job. And I'm sure we'll hear from those folks in a minute. Any other commissioner comments? Barring none, Randy, you got center stage.
Thank you. And I wanted to do you want me to start on the meeting first, or do you want me to go through this? Well, let me go from start to finish, and I'll save the meeting for the last. So Julie talked about the CalCog meeting. It was a great meeting. But afterwards, we took a drive up to Folsom and met the editor and the CEO of governing magazine, eRepublic. He owns eRepublic, so Dennis McKenna and his team. And we got to talk about the future in transportation. So we have a canned PowerPoint presentation that we give, and it talks about all the technology-based projects that we're working on here, from research to deployment. And so we got a lot of focus from the magazine. TechWire is interested in doing a story on the Gomentum station. They're interested in some of the other technology-based research projects that we've started, electric car sharing and things like that. So that was a great meeting. And then there's a lot of information going across the airwaves, and so the mayor, I often quote Mayor Garcetti, Eric Garcetti, well, his staff called and said, why are you setting the Gomentum station up in partnership with the city of Concord? Why are you doing this? How did you do that? And who gave you authorization to do that? Because they wanted to be first. And
they didn't think you just stayed
so the mayor's office is very interested because his vision is, as I mentioned before, City 3.0 is a connected future. And so he wants his city connected, but he wants a new generation of a transportation system running around and providing transportation services within the city of Los Angeles. And so that may be a good partner for us. They're a little bigger than Concord, but I'm pretty sure that we have as much muscle. Randy Carlton, Brian Kelleher, Ross, and I met with the banking team. We're starting the process again to refinance the $200 million of floating rate notes. We're going to take care of that here very shortly in the first part of June. And then as the dollars from the previous bond sale are invested in projects, and we're going to go out and sell another $100 million of fixed rate bonds later this year. And so interest rates are very low. So every time Randy has a saying, they can't go any lower, and they keep going lower. So I think the interest rate right now is 1.9, right? Isn't that? And we sold at 2.11 at the time. It was the lowest interest rate in the history of the bond market. So it's a little lower than the lowest last time we sold. So we're getting excited about that. Singapore came down, and they were greeted by a contingency from the city of Concord. They're excited about the test facility. They've created a, what is that, Ross, maybe a 4-block section, maybe 4 blocks in Singapore?
It's a 4x4. 4 square blocks. It's a research center, research business, university area.
The Naval Weapons Station is 5,000 acres. This one is 4 square blocks. So anyway, it's right in the middle of the city. So they want to partner with us. So many of the city council members welcomed the Singapore folks here. Made a presentation to the Concord City Council. There was a suggested name change to Gomentum Station. We kind of nixed that. Conmentum. See, it doesn't have the same ring. When we were in Washington, D.C. and talking to the modal program administrators, we talked to FTA, Federal Transit Agency. That's where your neighbor from San Ramon is the Region 9 Deputy Administrator, Ed. The thing that they were most interested in was dynamic transit operations, and that's one of the meetings that Peter had with our transit operator partner, Tri-Delta Transit, and the idea is connection protection, dynamic dispatch, and real-time ride sharing. So they're excited about that. When we met with FTA, they also have a grant program that they're starting now for ferry service. And so we're going to think we want to make an application for more money to then help offset some of our money, and we can pull some of those dollars off. The only way you can use those dollars is for capital improvements, so we're going to work with them on that. Lindsay's doing videos for the countywide transportation plan, what we heard, real life. Although we have to recruit a few. Jack Hall's mom and dad came down. Mom did a great job in the video. We pulled a guy from upstairs that we knew, and he was a little nervous, but he got through that. So stay tuned for that. And Julie mentioned the redefining mobility. It's truly about redefining mobility. It's going to change the way we look at the way we move people in America, in the world, if this thing takes off, which I think it will. TIA, the Telecommunications Industry Association, that was the first day. That was Monday. There was about 100 people there. It was a lot of very, very technical in nature. It was the Qualcomms of the world, the Ciscos of the world, talking about what they're going to do for the future cars. And then the second day was ours, was the redefining mobility. There was over 300 people. We thought we'd get maybe 200, but we got over 300 people listening to a number of speakers. Jim Madaffer is the CTC commissioner. He's in charge of the road charge subcommittee for the California Transportation Commission. If you're going to collect vehicle miles traveled, you're going to have to collect that somehow through technology. He sees this as a partner in it. So he was our keynote speaker, and he did a fantastic job. And on the commission, he's looking for opportunities to fund transit, to fund operation project or technology-based projects and operations projects. We're excited about his being on the CTC. And then all of this is now generating interest from the governor's office to create an innovation hub. And the East Bay does not have an iHub. And so now they're looking at centering iHub in Concord. And so we had a conversation. The city of Concord was represented, and we were there as well as the governor's office. We're going to try to make the Contra Costa Economic Partnership the focal point for that. So Kristen Connolly is drafting up an MOU, and we'll see where this goes. But the idea is to create an innovation hub and bring smart jobs so we don't have to drive as far to have high-paying jobs in Contra Costa.
County Workforce Board is actively involved as well.
Right. Lindsay and others had a meeting with Los Medanos College. The reason why this is important is that Concord High School is right along Gomentum Station. Literally, the back of the fence abuts the Naval Weapons Station. So I called Washington, D.C. Another one of the meetings that we had was with the Assistant Secretary for Research, Greg Winfrey. And there is a provision in the University Transportation Center legislation that provides federal money, the UTC, one of them is UC Berkeley, to have an attachment to a high school. So imagine a connection between Concord High School, UC Berkeley, and Los Bahanos Junior College. So now you've got an education center, and I understand that in the redevelopment, you're looking for a partner to build a university. So we're trying to provide that through this process with UC Berkeley or UC System Extension out there. And maybe it's focused in on automated driving. Who knows? We did the APTA Stand Up for Transportation Day in San Francisco. Perfect day. Beautiful day. We talked about the need for a long-term bill. That was one of the messages that we sent to our folks from the USDOT. We need a long-term bill. We don't need a short-term bill, and we need some certainty in transportation funding in the future. The CalCog regional meeting, after Executive Director Bill Higgins heard the Gomentum presentations, he wedged us in for 15 minutes in the morning. So I've made my first regional meeting, so I appreciate the opportunity to go to that. And then the federal engagement program, we spend 2 days storming the hill, if you will. We go to see United States Department of Transportation, and we talk about, and this year we talked about 4 things. One is a long-term bill. The second, and what Dave was trying to talk about, was a letter of no prejudice. So allow us to take risks. So when Ross is working on a federally funded HOV lane project, and he's in the environmental phase, he gets an E76 to start that process, he's going to do 30% design, because you have to know what you're going to environmentally clear. Well, 99% of the HOV lanes go in the median. They don't go on the outside. So why not let us design to 65%? If we met all the federal requirements, we get an E76, reimburse us for all that work. If we don't do it right, then we don't get reimbursed. But what happens is you have to start the environmental process. You have to finish the environmental process. Then you get another E76. That takes another 6 months. Then you do the design work for another 2 years. Then it takes another 6 months to get, or longer, to get an E76. Then you go to construction. Then they wonder, why does it take 17 years to deliver a project? So we sent the language to the Environment and Public Works, the Senate side committee that's drafting a bill, and we met with those folks as well. We said, make technology-based projects 100% eligible for federal funding. And then we talked about our state and local partnership program that we have here with Proposition 1B. So we're a sales tax county. So if we're $5 million short on a project, we can put $2.5 million down. The state kicks in $2.5 million, and you got a state and local partnership project. If you don't have a sales tax, generally you don't have $2.5 million to match. So we're trying to leverage existing sales tax and incentivize those counties that don't have a sales tax. We said do the same at the federal level. And Ross says, the last 3 years, he said, hey, we need to fund Hercules on a Tiger grant. He said, we've struck out 3 times, but we're going after it on the 4th try. So we talked about the Hercules. There's a fact sheet in there. And then we talked about Gomentum Station only because we're making a pitch to be a connected vehicle pilot demonstration program site. And if we do that, we're asking for $20 million. Those dollars will be used outside of the Gomentum Station to improve you're going to have to outfit cars with connection devices to the infrastructure. So those are dollars for infrastructure for both cars and for the streets of Concord, the streets of Walnut Creek, or along Ignacio Valley Road. So that was the first day. We met with Deputy Secretary Mendez, Assistant Secretary Greg Winfrey, Acting Administrator Greg Nadal from Federal Highway Administration, FTA, Teresa McMillan, who used to work at MTC. She's the Acting FTA Administrator. The next morning, we went and met with the global automakers. They had, the place was packed, and they did not want us to leave. And it was, there was just a number of questions. How do we partner? Sirius XM radio was there. They're going to call Honda. Honda was there. Toyota was there. After this meeting with global automakers, that we walked over because Yoshi Nakamura is a friend, and so I told him we were in town, so he wanted to meet with us. We talked about Gomentum Station with Toyota. And we met with Feinstein's folks. We did talk, who's your military contact? Because she was the chair of the military, the intelligence committee. So they have good contacts with the Navy. So if we're having problems in the Navy, we might as well, if we can't get through the normal process, just go. It's a lot faster to go up top down than it is from us messing around all the time trying to go to the side. So anyway, they're interested in jobs in the Bay Area, so they were excited about that. Met with a new kid, Andrew Neely, EPW majority side, so it's switched now, the Democrats and the Republicans. So those folks that we used to talk to on the majority side are now on the minority side, and the minority side's on the majority side. We asked, what's the difference between being on the minority side and the majority side? Well, if you're on the minority side, you work together, and the Senate side, you work on the language, you can go home. It's the majority side that has to draft everything they heard. So they stay up to 4 o'clock in the morning and then get the comments ready for 10 o'clock in the morning. So we met with Andrew Neely. He wants actually a presentation. What do you call it? A WebEx. Thanks. He wants a WebEx. I'm supposed to be the technology guy with the WebEx. And we're going to do some PowerPoint presentations on funding and on Gomentum Station. They're exciting. And then the minority side, Sean Boyajian, Alex Hargot, Andrew Dorman, and David, I can't pronounce his last name. We've met with those guys over many, many years, and they're excited about it. We laid out all those points with them, and then we went downstairs to kind of regroup. We met with Parsons Brinkerhoff's Kathy Connor, who was a lobbyist, I think, when we went a time ago. And then we met with Kathy Ruffalo, and she used to work for Inhofe, Bacchus. So we saw a lot of people we knew, and it was a great trip.
There's one thing he left out, if I may, Madam Chair. We also met with Congressman Mark DeSaulnier, which, after he got through telling Randy to say hi to Steve Heminger for him, but he did say one thing very interesting.
You're right.
He's on the Transportation Committee.
Oversight,
whatever. And he said that Micah is looking for him to take on a project. He said, we got the project for you. So it'll be interesting, little follow-up on that too, whether or not Mark, in his own district, is going to want to stay involved with this, because he sounded a little excited about it too.
Great. Thank you, Randy. That's awesome. You have your calendar in the packet, calendar of upcoming events. And the next item on the agenda is our closed session. So we will now go into closed session pursuant to Government Code 54957 for public employee performance evaluation of the